Well, my dear friends, it was only yesterday I said that the Andor series is about to get a marketing boost. Not only this, but of course the press tour. Now recently we had comments from Diego Luna, Genevieve O'Reilly and Sana Vollenberg with Entertainment Weekly, but today guys, we're in for an absolute treat. Not only do we have a new look at the Andor series in terms of a new still, but Diego Luna's given some new information on the show with Den of Geek. I'm so excited to go through this with you guys. Let's dive straight into it. Star Wars Andor revives what's been missing from the saga. Ooh, intriguing stuff. So evidently to do with the early rebellion, some of the underground movements that didn't really make it on screen into A New Hope. The galaxy's a huge place and obviously there are pockets of rebels everywhere. And even if they're not part of the main alliance, as Mon Mothma says in the teaser trailer, people are rising up. So the unsung heroes basically of the galaxy. And on the Imperial side of things, while I do think there's a chance we will see Palpatine and Tarkin, Krennic and other big Imperials, we're also going to see the ISB and some of the secretive elements of that too. But we should leave speculation till afterwards. Let's dive into the article. From the moment he steps onto the screen, you know that this rebel is not like the others. Cassian Andor can be cold and ruthless, has a certain air of danger about him, and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty, even if it means killing an informant in a tight spot. When we first meet him in 2016's Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, Cassian is a far cry from the altruistic rebel heroes featured in the morally black and white movies that George Lucas made in the 70s and 80s. As we spend more time with Cassian, we learn that he's the agent the Rebel Alliance sends in when it's time to go off the books. But how did this lifelong freedom fighter become the rebellion's foremost assassin? That's the question at the center of Andor, a new live-action series coming to Disney Plus in August. The spy thriller, as we know, follows Cassian 5 years before the events of Rogue One and reunites actor Diego Luna with writer-director Tony Gilroy, who oversaw extensive reshoots for the 2016 movie. When Luna sits down to chat with Den of Geek over Zoom, that's right, it was a Zoom meeting, there's clear enthusiasm, but also relief in his voice. Andor is finally seeing the light of day, but the 42-year-old actor is quick to point out how tough the shoot was. Cameras started rolling in the UK in November of 2020 in the early days of the COVID pandemic. The show was originally supposed to film earlier that year, but production delays across virtually every studio on the planet meant that Luna was left to wonder if he'd actually ever get a chance to play Cassian again. And just reading this article, it makes me think back to the early Andor updates that we got in 2020. The creatives on this show faced so many hurdles, it was not an easy time. So then we have a quote. In his own words, Diego Luna says, "I went through so many stages, different ones of thinking this wasn't happening. There was no need for something like this. Then I went, oh, we have to do this. The whole team needs to know that they're capable of pulling this off." So much like the rebellion, the creatives on Andor faced a lot of challenges, and hope, as always, has to be at the center. And so in many ways, the amazing people who worked on this show must be so relieved we're so close to this show dropping. It's been a long time coming. Now, Diego Luna says he was a fan of Star Wars ever since he was a kid. Speaking on what it was like wrapping the show's first season, he says it was quite an experience. "I don't think anything in my life has been like that, and I'm sure nothing will be like that ever again. It was such a mix of emotions." But to some viewers, and I have seen this opinion many times online, a show about Cassian might seem like an odd choice. Some fans think, why Cassian? What's so interesting about this character? Or better still, didn't we see him die in Rogue One? So what's the point in exploring this character's past? Well, to those fans, there are so many reasons, because Andor in many ways isn't just about his story, but about many different parts of the galaxy, different factions of the rebels at this point in the timeline, 5 years before Rogue One. It's not just going to give context to that film either, it's going to be its own standalone thing, giving us various perspectives in a political thriller. And Diego says, "For me, Rogue One is the beginning of something. I'm so happy to be able to dig in deeper." In fact, the actor says that going backwards with the tale of Cassian Andor is an exciting challenge. He says, "We know where this character ends, but how complicated can we make it for him to get there?" And that's where the creativity comes in, because it's never the way you approach a story. He says it's like a different part of your brain that has to connect. It's exciting to have the opportunity in storytelling of going backwards and not forwards. Going forwards is easy. As an actor, this is what you're always asked to do. Rogue One didn't reveal much about Cassian's past, but the spy does mention that he's been fighting the Empire since he was 6 years old. That line and the backstory Luna formed in his head to better understand his character's motivations in the movie are the jumping off points for the show. Not only this, but the Rogue One novelization, the tie-in material like the comics and the visual guides do give us some understanding, and we're gonna see that in more greater depth in this series. But back in 2016, Diego Luna assumed that Cassian's origin story would only live in his imagination. He never thought we would see the rebels' formative years on screen. Another quote from him, "All this story just happened in my mind. It wasn't relevant to anyone. He talks about a traumatic past, but there is no specificity. Obviously, as an actor, I had my backstory. You don't arrive on set without knowing where you're coming from and what motivates every decision your character makes, but that's information no one cared about for years." Well, he's wrong there, because many of us who loved Rogue One absorbed every little bit of information from the comics, from the tie-in material as I said, and to this day 6 years after the film came out, was still excited and interested in these characters. According to the actor in this interview, fleshing out the character's history with Gilroy and the writing team for Andor was, quote, "like when you dream something and then suddenly you're talking about that dream with others. I was asked so many times, what were you thinking when you said this? What was your backstory in this moment?" While the series has already been greenlit for a second season that sets up the events of Rogue One, the Cassian Andor we're meeting in this show, at least at the start of the show, isn't at all interested in revolution and is definitely not willing to sacrifice himself for the rebel cause. So a very different Andor to what we see in Rogue One. He's got a lot of character development to undergo, and in many ways that makes the series so exciting, to see that character growth. But instead, season 1 of Andor is the story of a migrant trying to survive in a foreign and hostile place. And it's here where Diego Luna shares some new information. He says, quote, "It's difficult to find out where he comes from, because obviously he's been forced to move, and what he's talking about here, guys, is the fact that Cassian Andor's planet, his home planet of Fest, gets destroyed by the Empire." Diego Luna continues by saying, "And today the story of a refugee is a story that is very pertinent to the world and where we find it. It's so difficult to find yourself in a place where people aren't coming from somewhere else." And this goes back to what he said with Entertainment Weekly, that this show is very relevant to the world we live in. It has some very strong political messages, very similar to what George Lucas set out with the original trilogy. Honestly guys, I think this show is going to win so many awards. The setup as a spy thriller with all of this new info sounds exactly like what Star Wars needs right now. So moving forward in the interview, Diego Luna talks about how the disenfranchised can stand up to effect change. In his own words he said, "Trying to find the opportunities, the freedom, the chances they don't find when they're born. That energy is inside Cassian. When I was acting, when I was trying to find what each moment meant, I was trying to find reference to my life. I think Star Wars has always been great at that. It always speaks about its time, and that's what makes not just this project, but Star Wars really important for so many." And I've said it before guys, and I'm gonna say it here, Star Wars has always been political, and I love when art can take something about the real world and show us the courage of heroes that do something about it. In this case, standing up to Imperial oppression, and Diego Luna seems to embody the character so well. I love when actors care so deeply about their characters. I just can't express how excited I am. And his final comment in the interview, "I can tell you that everyone in Andor is there because they have something to say. And that's a beautiful thing to be a part of. We need to work, we need to tell stories, and we need to remind ourselves that what we do is important." Excellent, excellent stuff. Honestly guys, go out and read this for yourselves. It's on denofgeek.com. It's a must read. Probably the most insightful article we've had for the Andor series so far. And as I said, we do have this new still. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Does this make you excited for the series? Why so, or why not? If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you always. I'm Megan, also known as Star Wars Meg. Have a good one.